Okay, we are live now.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest installment of the USINPAC Presidential Dialogue Series. We are joined today by a senior representative of Ted Cruz, who's running for president. Ted Cruz, of course, being a Republican senator from Texas, who has been a leading presidential candidate. In fact, he had an excellent victory in Iowa, which day of the poll he wasn't expected to win. It was supposed to be Donald Trump, but Ted Cruz came through and won that. And he continued that momentum on to New Hampshire, where despite not spending as much time or other resources in the state, he had a very strong showing in that state compared to others who basically were camped out there for several months. And now we are on to the upcoming primary states, and he's also well positioned to do very well in those states as well. A little bit about USINPAC and just some background about why USINPAC has been so successful about reaching out to presidential campaigns and helping them deliver their message to Indian Americans, and also conveying issues important to the Indian American community to these presidential campaigns. We've been involved in doing this since 2004, since the group was first started. So we've been involved in the 2004 election, 2008, 2012, and now this election as well. And one of the many reasons for this, why presidential campaigns reach out to us when we work with them, is because Indian Americans have a very strategic and important population in a lot of these key caucus and primary states. Iowa and New Hampshire have, as we just saw in the prior election, have very strong communities and a voter base there. And South Carolina, which is coming up, has over 16,000 Indian American voters. Nevada with 12,000. The list goes on and on. And even the key swing states in the presidential general election, Ohio has 64,000 Indian Americans, Florida with 130,000 Indian American voters. So, we have a nice population that's very active and votes regularly in these presidential elections. So that's one of the many reasons why we've been so successful of discussing issues important to the community with campaigns. I'll want to pass on to Chris Wilson, who represents Ted Cruz. Chris, could you give a little background on yourself and what you've been doing with the campaign?
Sure. My name is, again, Chris Wilson, Director of Research and Analytics for the campaign. And what that means is I direct all polling, I direct all analytics, I direct all targeting, be it voter targeting, digital targeting, donor targeting, whatever the case may be. And targeting is just reaching out to specific universes, be they mass universes over television or more direct universes through digital, social, display, video, things like that. And so I do have to offer up the caveat from the beginning. I have almost nothing at all to do with policy. So as we get into tough questions, I may have to defer and just plead ignorance on it. Not that I cannot speak in broad terms, but the challenge with that is with Senator Cruz has very specific and well thought through positions, and so I would be hesitant to mischaracterize any of them in cases of tough questions. So I'll just mention that again as we get started here. But my role has been I was one of the first ones here in the office. I'm in my office here in Houston today, which is the Cruz headquarters. I think I was the second or third person here, and have been here almost every day since. And it is I was listening to someone from the Romney campaign talk this morning on NPR about their role back in 2012 and how it was they would start at 7 a.m. on a conference call, and then usually they'd get home about 10. She'd get home about 10 o'clock at night, and maybe fix her something to eat, go to sleep, and try and go to the gym about 5 a.m. and then do it all over again. In the meantime, try and FaceTime or call with her family, and got to the point where they didn't want to talk to her anymore because all she wanted to do was talk about the campaign. And this morning I was FaceTiming with my kids who still live in Oklahoma City and asked them if they felt the same way, and they hopefully jokingly said yes. It's you kind of get stuck in a rut of this being your entire life and all you do. And I'm sure for those of you who are small business people understand, because it really is like a small business. And when we started out, there was less than 10 of us here, and we were just kind of on a dream and a prayer. And when I left, my family all patted me on the head and said, "This is nice. We'll see you in a few months." And now, a year later, and after a victory in Iowa and I think a surprising third place finish in New Hampshire, we have created what in business terms is a multi-million-dollar business, one that's successful, now employs over 100 people. Not that that was the goal to employ that many people, but it just, I think we were doing something here that probably most people on the call can relate to, because it really is almost a startup in the sense of having to raise money, in this case from donors, and then going out and trying to get people to vote for you, which is a marketing exercise, which Dolly Ford and I were talking about before I think everyone else got on the phone. And that is that's my role here at the campaign, and hopefully I can say some things that will be of interest to your members.
Hey, thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. We have several questions that we've obtained from reaching out to the Indian American community throughout the U.S., where they sent in their questions to us. We went through and compiled them, and we have a few key people with the PAC from throughout the country that will be asking them. The first question is from Dolly Kapoor. Dolly is actually on the board of the Chamber of Commerce in Nevada, which is an upcoming state. And Dolly, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Manish. Chris, wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
You guys can hear me, right? Okay, great. My first question is, technology, as we know, is changing the world, and Silicon Valley is very predominantly taken by Indian American entrepreneurs. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about how you see Ted Cruz presidency playing a role in the new economy?
That's a great question, and I think you'd have to look at my role, I think, to answer that. And Senator Cruz has on multiple occasions sort of described himself as a disruptive technology in politics, for better or for worse. So there's a lot of people who ride in Uber that are very appreciative that they exist. There's a lot of taxi drivers that probably aren't as appreciative, or maybe taxi company owners that aren't as appreciative. But the point is it has been a disruptive technology in the sense that it has changed the way in which we operate, how we take a car from point A to point B. And I can tell you, it is working on this campaign. My very first conversation with Senator Cruz was about technology and was about the use of data and analytics, and was his instructive to me is that no one would ever be more technologically advanced than we were. And if that did occur, the implication was clear that they'd probably find somebody else to play my role. And I think that same appreciation for advances in technology, disruptive technologies, and then frankly the small business aspect of that, because every one of these, the business, Uber is a multi-billion-dollar business today, is Airbnb, but they are ones that were started by an individual entrepreneur who had an idea and then started to put that idea on paper and then began to build it out. And I think you will find no more supportive White House resident than that. And it is from someone who appreciates that, who understands it, and is also not beholden to some of the special interests that do get involved on the other side, that maybe are against the disruptive technologies and try and stop them from playing their role. And I can tell you, if you live in Las Vegas, and you're probably well aware of the fight that went on between the taxi cabs and the Uber drivers there. And that was fascinating to watch, as I do a lot of work out there. And as the process went on, because you could very quickly see who lined up on which side in terms of special interests versus individuals. And I think, again, Senator Cruz's support for small business and for startups and operations like that is going to be unmatched amongst any of the candidates.
Well, thanks, Chris. And our next question is going to shift from business to sort of foreign policy type questions. Sanjay Puri, being the chairman and founder of USINPAC over a decade ago, he's based in Washington, D.C. Sanjay?
Sure. Chris, thanks for being here, and thanks for a great answer to the first question. Wanted to get an idea, because a lot of our members, we have the community is 3.2 million around this country. A lot of them are interested in a strong U.S.-India economic and political relationship, and especially how India can be a partner with United States in combating terrorism. Just wanted to get some idea from you in terms of what are Senator Cruz's views on a U.S.-India relationship?
I've got to be honest with Sanjay, that would be an area where, from a standpoint of the work that we are doing right now, and my work specifically has been primarily focused on Republican primary voters. And you bring up terrorism, and there's no question that it is a very important issue to Republican primary voters, but foreign policy issues are probably not something that I've been as focused on as I wish I had been, in order to answer your question. I will say, from a military standpoint, Senator Cruz gave a speech today in Charleston with Governor Perry and former our Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer standing at his side, in which he talked about a need to rebuild the military. And I think rebuilding the military and the ability to make sure that the U.S. returns to a point of strength in the world means maintaining relations with our allies. And I know I can speak to Senator Cruz being very disappointed in the way many of our allies have been treated during the last 8 years and the desire to rebuild those relationships. So it is, I apologize for my inability to get more specific on that, and it is one where I'd be happy to get more information, or even I probably should have had Austin First, who is our policy director, who's actually in the office right behind me here, that could have given you a much more thorough answer. But I do think, from an overall standpoint of relationships with allies, that is one area where certainly India is an important ally, and one that I know would be at the top of the Cruz administration's agenda in terms of making sure that that is a relationship that is upheld and strengthened.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. Yeah, no, we certainly understand that there are a lot of people with the campaign that different roles, and part of this is just to kind of convey to you, to then convey to the campaign as well, the issues that are important to the community. And one of them is certainly foreign policy questions. So India has been a strong ally, and the U.S. And India have strengthened their relationship significantly every year for the past several years. So we're definitely hoping that continues under Senator Cruz if he goes on to become president.
Sure.
So the next question actually is, if we want to move to immigration, Vic. Vic is also one of the early members of the PAC and is also based in Washington D.C., but is actually a voter in Virginia, which will be a swing state.
Thanks, Manish. Welcome, Chris. And so I want to get on to immigration, which was not a Republican issue initially, but thanks to Donald and Senator Rubio, it has become a prime issue. So I'd like to know where Senator Cruz is on the whole immigration issue, and especially with the demographic shift now in the South and Nevada and etc.
Sure. Well, I think a lot has been discussed about immigration, and I certainly couldn't and probably add to what has been to some of the points that were made in the debates over the last few weeks. The one point that I think Senator Cruz has made effectively is that the challenge with immigration has been the attention that's paid to it, and we ran an ad that, from a digital marketing standpoint, actually was named one of the most viewed ads, political or non-political, on Google, going back to some of the conversations we had at the beginning. But it was called Invasion, and it showed how different the attitudes would be if you had journalists or lawyers or potential members of Congress coming across the border, and the fact that it's really more labor, that in terms of jobs that are being lost, that it's made it less of an issue and maybe one that isn't covered as effectively as it might be. And so the point of that ad is that this is important, that immigration, any immigration that is continued, is handled legally. And that has been Senator Cruz's position from the outset, is that legal immigration is very different from illegal immigration. Those two need to be decoupled, because I think a lot of times immigration as an issue is addressed as holistically rather than the two are separated out. And that's one of the things Senator Cruz has been very strong on. He has also been strong in terms of making sure that immigration is, illegal immigration is stopped, and that's going to be a priority in a Cruz administration, which, once illegal immigration is stopped, then you can take a harder look at going back to and focusing on legal immigration and increasing the number of HB1s and things along those lines. Although right now the top priority would be stopping illegal immigration.
Thanks, Chris, and we appreciate you mentioning that there are different aspects to immigration. There's illegal and there's legal, and there's the business side of the legal immigration with the H-1Bs, and we appreciate you mentioning that. That is actually it's the legal immigration that Indian Americans are most concerned about from their own perspective, as far as the immigration that our community has had, and also on the business side. We have a lot of people who come in on H-1Bs, and we have a lot of people who often have transitioned that visa to stay here and to become entrepreneurs and to contribute to society. So that is something that is very important to the community. So we appreciate being on the call and briefly mentioning that as well.
Well, it's an important distinction too, because I think too often that gets those two immigration just as a whole gets coupled together. When the fact is, as you point out, they are very different, and one is a positive influence in society. Not to say that the second isn't, but it's a very different operation in terms of what the overall effect and the effect on jobs and things like that. So I think it is an important it's an important issue to continue to be discussed in the way that you suggest.
Thanks so much. And I'll tell you, when we talk to primary and caucus voters, that is something that's often on their mind, but they don't really like to ask it at a town hall in front of everybody because they are coupled together so much, the legal and the illegal aspect of it. So we very much appreciate you bringing it up, and we'll definitely convey that to the community. Our next question is a domestic question. Indian Americans, another one of our culturally back in India, and we brought that here as well, is that education is very important to each family. I think parents take probably the first political act that a parent will take is, in addition, and maybe after voting, is probably attending a parent-teacher conference or being part of a parent-teacher organization. That's something that's very important to the community. And could you discuss under Cruz presidency, how would education look, and what kinds of policies would there be out there?
Sure. Well, it's a good question. Again, I'm going to say that my knowledge of this is probably pretty cursory, just because I'm focused on a primary situation right now, and I'll state again, my job is research, analytics, and digital marketing. So from a standpoint of getting involved in issues, it's just whatever I know is from picking up in senior staff meetings when the policy guy talks. But having said that, I will say the first goal of a Cruz presidency would be return control of education back to the local level. Senator Cruz has called openly or called loudly for repeal of Common Core and even for the abolishment of the Department of Education, not because he doesn't feel like education is important, but because he feels like it is too important to turn it over to the federal government. And in fact, you can trace the downfall of public education in the United States and it's falling behind in areas like math and science directly to the involvement of the federal government. And so one of the first goals of Cruz presidency, and I think, would be to change the way our education system looks and to turn it back over to local, number one, to school boards, number two, to the local schools, and number three, and probably most importantly, to the parents. And I don't mean those three in any certain order, because I think it's got to go to the parents first. I mean, I speak as the father of two boys, 13 and 12, that they probably learn as much, if not more, from watching Khan Academy videos than they do from what they get out of school. And I think that's an important aspect of education, is to make sure that, why should my kid, if they can get a better lesson from watching a Khan Academy video, why shouldn't they have the opportunity to do that? And so that is one of the that's probably about as deep as I can get in terms of talking about education, is the aspect of local control. There are and I should probably say over and over again, the website is tedcruz.org, and it does have policy papers and just about everything you can think about on it. And so for any of your listeners who are frustrated with my lack of knowledge on these issues, I would say go to tedcruz.org and please feel free to please dig around on it. And if you don't find any issues or particular policy issues, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to make sure that you get those. But anyway, local control and I'd say repeal of Common Core are probably the two things that I would, the first two reforms you will see under a Cruz presidency.
Great, and actually, so you are actually being very informative. So please don't worry about
to hear that.
We really appreciate it, and we understand this is just kind of to highlight some of the issues important in the community, and then your website will have more information, and we'll also pass on more information as the community asks. So we really appreciate all the information you're providing us. The next question actually comes from someone who noticed that I think you may not be aware of this, but Senator Cruz made a Facebook post back when Narendra Modi, who is the current Prime Minister of India, so when he was elected, and so when Narendra Modi delivered a speech kind of accepting that he was the Prime Minister, he actually broke down with emotion. And Senator Cruz, his exact quote was, "Congratulations to India's," in quotes, "new hope and inspiration," close quote, Narendra Modi. "Texas and the United States look forward to a long and prosperous friendship." That's something that it seems to be indicative of Senator Cruz really paying attention to world affairs, and want to just get a little bit of information on that and kind of how much time he spends and how important that is to him and things he's done in the Senate. And also, is that something that he would continue as president with engaging India? I know we touched on that earlier, but just wanted to.
Sure. Well, you know, I didn't know about that, and I'm glad that you bring that up. And I do think it is indicative to. There are a lot of things that are said about Senator Ted Cruz, and I can tell you, I've gotten to know him very, very well. I consider him to be a close friend. I've seen him as a husband, as a father, as a boss on this campaign, as a CEO of this campaign, as a senator, and as a presidential candidate. And I can tell you, under any realm of evaluation, he is by far the most qualified, and I know most of the other people that are running for president. But the one area in which I don't think anyone would argue he stands head and shoulders among everyone else in this field is intellect. And I don't mean that pejoratively toward the others. He's just that smart. And it is remarkable his ability to recall information and to capture information and then to process and make that and to utilize that information. And I think back, and this is indicative of it, to a conversation we had at the very beginning of the campaign, or before the campaign started, where I talked about a technique we had done that any of your stats people will appreciate, called a Monte Carlo simulation. We run a Monte Carlo simulation of every voter in order to extrapolate opinions and voting habits. And so I talked to him about, I mentioned that in a dinner we had in November, and I was talking in a group he was in at an organizational meeting later in June, I believe, and he quoted back to me line for line what I'd said to him at that dinner, just bringing it up and asking me to tell all the people that were in the room about it. It stood out to me because it's not something that's been written about or I talked to others about. Now, why that is applicable to his foreign policy expertise or in his what he cares about there is, I can tell you, anybody he sits down and talks to, any organization he meets with, a lot of times you'll find, and I think you could probably point out people in the race who have sort of a cursory, just basic knowledge of something that they get from talking points or what have been referred to as 25-second speeches that are delivered on the Senate floor. Whereas Senator Cruz's knowledge goes much, much deeper than that. His foreign policy advisor is a woman named Victoria Coates, who I've gained immense respect for. I happen to be on the email chains in which she sends out information about what's going on, non-classified information obviously, but that deals with different developments in different countries. And his immediate engagement, his understanding and aptitude for those issues, and his ability to quickly make decisions and engage in those issues is like nothing I've ever seen before. And this is my third presidential campaign at a high level like this, and I've worked with, like I said, almost everybody in the field at some level, with the exception of Donald Trump. I've never worked with him. But I think anyone else would be challenged to process information and make decisions as effectively as Ted Cruz does. And it is what we need in a president, because the ability to understand who our allies are, to interact with those allies, to know them, to know everything about them, and to do little things like notice someone getting emotional in a speech and reach out to someone on that. I mean, that's who Ted Cruz is. And it really is remarkable from his ability to connect with people very quickly and understand them and who they are. And you know, sometimes I think that is it's almost to his detriment, because it creates a certain degree of animosity of colleagues, because he is so good at that. But it's also the kind of person that we need as a president, because we've got a lot of relations to rebuild with other world leaders. And I don't think there'd be anyone who'd be better at that than Ted Cruz.
Great. Well, thank you. And actually, the next question is, it kind of ties in foreign policy and also immigration together. And actually, it's actually something that was very favorably said by Senator Cruz recently and well received by the Indian American community. The context is that when Donald Trump had made the comments about wanting to ban all Muslims from the United States, you know, there were a lot of reactions from different candidates. But what Senator Cruz said was very thoughtful, and he actually mentioned India. He said there are millions of peaceful Muslims across the world in countries like India. And she gave India as an example. And then he went on to say that India isn't seeing the problems like, quote, we're seeing in nations that are controlled by Al-Qaeda or ISIS, and that the focus should be to defeat radical Islamic terrorism. I wanted to pass on to Sanjay real quick, Sanjay Puri, the chairman of the USINPAC, to give a little bit more background on the relationship that Muslims in India have had and sort of contemporary, how the atmosphere is between you know, Muslims and Hindus and other minorities there. Because I believe, and Sanjay will have the exact stats, but I believe it's the second most populous Muslim country, or the second highest Muslim population of any country is in India. So, Sanjay?
Sure. Chris, again, thanks for your insight. Manish talked about, India is a multi-religious country. It's pluralistic. It's a predominant Hindu country, but, again, a country of almost 1.25 billion, but it has the second largest Muslim population. It has one of the oldest Jewish population in the country. It has a large Christian population. It's amazing when you go to India, you'll see a temple, a mosque, and a church side by side and coexisting. It's got, after Indonesia, the second largest population, the second largest Shia population. So the point obviously is that working with allies like India, I think there is a real opportunity, and I think that you have emphasized that. One of the things that, however, is a message that maybe you can also pass on, as you said, you don't deal with policy, but you can obviously look at it, is that President Obama has recently announced a aid package to Pakistan, which is a challenging, and it's a military package. They're going to be giving F-16s to Pakistan, and obviously Pakistan, everybody wants Pakistan to succeed as a democracy, but there is a challenge out there because there are elements within Pakistan that have supported the killings of Americans, whether it was in 26/11 or it's our U.S. forces in Afghanistan, and also it has been conducting an insurgency against one of our allies, India. So the Indians obviously are pretty upset. The Indian American community is pretty upset. Nobody questions giving aid for democracy, for women's rights, etc., to Pakistan, but giving them aid for military equipment is something that's obviously very questionable. And F-16s in that region are going to add some fuel to the fire because the Indians are going to then ratchet it up. So that is a perspective for you. I'm not looking for comments because, as you said, you're not the policy person, so I respect that. But it is something for you to take back, that it is something that has really got the Indian American community, and it should be for all American communities, that we need to be careful in terms of how we deal with allies and also countries that probably have not been the greatest in terms of working with us and our interests. So that's some perspective from the Indian American communities to you.
Well, thank you for that. And I do think, I'll just say again, I don't think you're going to find a bigger critic than Senator Ted Cruz in terms of the way that this administration has conducted itself with our allies. And this is, I think, what you just detailed there is a perfect example of that. And it's frustrating. I mean, I can only imagine how frustrating it is for those of you with Indian American backgrounds. And again, it's equally frustrating to Senator Cruz.
Manish?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. And actually, with the Indian American community, just being very technologically savvy as well. We have a strong population that works in IT and in a variety of different industries. So we're actually wondering, based on what you do, your role with the campaign, kind of a two-part question, but where can voters go and find more information from you guys? If you're on Twitter, if you're on, kind of what social media and other types of media you're on, and also just describe some of the ways that the campaign reaches out to, uses technology to spread its message out, and maybe how they'll also reach out to our own technologically savvy community as well.
Sure. Well, I would suggest again, there has not been a more technologically friendly campaign than ours. I have literally, for the first 6 months, I met with absolutely anyone who had a new technology to share, because I wanted to learn so much about it and look at implementing everything. That's stopped just because of time constraints. But certainly from March on until early fall, I probably did a couple meetings or calls a day about trying to look at anything and everything that was out there that we thought might help us in terms of appealing to voters and communicating with voters utilizing technology. Some of the things that we use is obviously the website, tedcruz.org. We also communicate through pretty much every social media. Twitter is probably the senator's favorite. It is mostly him on there, so when you see something that's a little crazy, like he famously, Donald Trump called him a maniac, and he tweeted the maniac scene from Flashdance with the woman dancing. That was all him, trust me. He was also the one who did the Fonzie jump the shark scene after Trump brought up that suggested he was not eligible to be president because of his despite the fact he was born to an American mother, but was in Canada. And those are so the more clever things I think that come from the Twitter account are almost always him. In fact, it's one of the things that you kind of look at it first and go, God, I really hope this was Senator Cruz, because if this was somebody else in the campaign, they're probably going to get fired. You find out it was him, and 9 times out of 10 it works out okay. And then there is, obviously we have a Facebook page, which is just / Ted Cruz. Some of the things we use technologically, and that's I take a lot of pride in this because it does fall under me. We have an app that has now been downloaded over 60,000 times, more so than anybody else in the field, and it's been evaluated by a lot of people, some usually favorably, sometimes unfavorably, because they feel like it's a little bit too intrusive, but there's nothing we do on there that we don't ask permission to do. But it is, the app is pretty cool, and I take pride in it because it sort of merges all of my areas together, which are research, analytics, and digital. And so anybody who wants to, you can go to the App Store on iTunes or the Google equivalent and search for Ted Cruz 2016. I think now it comes up with Ted Cruz. It's whatever the App Store equivalent of SEO is, but it's now worked out to that level where it does come up. It didn't at first. And what it does is, no matter where you are in America, if you want to be involved with the Cruz campaign, you can do that. And what we've done with the app is we've gamified the campaign process. And so if you retweet Ted Cruz, you get action points for that. If you like him on Facebook or share a Facebook post, you get action points for that. You get action. It also asks for permission to match your contacts. We don't download your contacts, but what we do is we match it up with our national voter file, and we can tell you, for instance, if there was someone in your contacts who lived in Iowa that we scored as a likely Ted Cruz voter, we bugged you the week before the campaign and asked you to reach out to them and ask them to vote for someone, because every study ever done shows the most effective way to communicate with voters is for them to hear about someone, a candidate, from a friend. And so that is something we have taken very seriously. And so if you live in an early primary state, March 1st state, which voting became live today, like for instance today in Texas, early voting starts, you'll get a notification on your app to please turn out and vote, and you get action points for that. You can also donate through the app. We also use text messaging for anyone who wants to donate to the campaign. You just text donate to 55022. That is something that took me 6 months to get set up. Obama used that very, very well, and I started trying to get that set up in May, and I'm sure anyone who's involved in this industry and works with the cell companies probably understands my frustration. I had no idea what I was getting into. So that only came live the week before the Iowa caucus. And that's why you probably haven't seen that promoted very much. So it's tedcruz.org, or text donate to 55022. You've got the app. And we're on Snapchat and just, like I said, about every other social media. Some of the fun things we have done, though, is, Snapchat is just worked out to where you can actually match voter files, and we can actually geofence now with Snapchat specific areas. We can actually go on with our account and draw a polygon around. For instance, we did whenever I forget what convention it was. There was one not too long ago that was at the Sands Convention Center. I geofenced it out and ran a Snapchat filter. We'll do that every now and then with different locations, different things, just to have fun and try and get a little bit of press attention out of it. We did a lot of football games during the fall. So those are, we use technology, I think, to reach every different universe. We're not just focused solely on millennials through technology. I think that's one of the big mistakes, is people forget about the fact that just about everyone is on some form of social media. And you can reach just about everyone through social media and digitally. And so those are, if there's anything we're not using, I would love to have somebody on your team or in your membership point it out to me and say, here's something I don't see you guys using, because trust me, I'll start using it the next day. We are not beneath being told that there's more, that we have a lot to learn, because I recognize that it's something, there's new developments, new technologies being developed every day, and so we want to make sure we stay on top of those more effectively than anyone else in the field.
Okay, yeah, and I think that Indian Americans are going to be a lot of people developing those new technologies.
I bet that's true. In fact, I got to tell you, I got to give some credit. One of the, I won't say who, just because he hasn't released this, but one of the initial founders, he wasn't a founder, he was one of the first people at Google who was an Indian American, came in and asked to meet with me early on in the campaign and asked what we were doing. I showed him some of our dashboards, and as soon as I was done, he said, okay, that's what I wanted to see, and he actually wrote us a check to the campaign. So he just wanted to make sure that he wasn't wasting money on someone who didn't understand technology. And then he went through a process of educating me on how to use social media to do issue testing. Now, he had done this test, they had used it, this type of testing to develop new products at Google. And it was very simple, very inexpensive, and incredibly effective. And for any of you who haven't read it, there's a great piece that Sasha Eisenberg wrote in Bloomberg the day after. It was actually the night of the Iowa caucuses that details some of the things we did, and it talks about our use of this type of testing, in which we started in Iowa testing 77 different issues that allowed us to then narrow it down to the 10 that we ultimately used from a built modeling and predictive model standpoint for communication. But that was all done through a gentleman of Indian American heritage who showed up in my office one day just wanting to talk, and it was probably one of those productive meetings I've had on the campaign.
That's great. Oh, that's really an interesting story. Thanks for sharing. That's really nice to hear, and you know, it's something that Indian Americans are always getting involved in campaigns. I mean, back since, gosh, it's been since, I know Indian Americans volunteering in primary campaigns since '92. I mean, it's been and probably earlier than that. And oftentimes the way Indian Americans are getting involved is by going, you know, get out the vote type things. But it's interesting to see, you know, different ways that people can get in the campaign, involved in the campaign as well. So that's really helpful to hear. And actually, you mentioned social media campaign. We've actually, USINPAC is starting a social media campaign group, of course. And that's another question for you, but it might be more informational since I know it's not in the realm of your ability to speak in depth about. But you know, with the unfortunate passing of Justice Scalia, and I'm an attorney, so really hit every American hard, but especially attorneys that really read and really went into his opinions. I mean, regardless whether you agree or disagree with them, it's just an incredible legal mind. You know, with an opening on the Supreme Court, we're hoping that whether, you know, I know there's debate whether it be this year or next year with this administration or the next administration, and staying out of that debate, what we're hoping is that whoever is appointed, that there are a lot of Indian American justices at appeals court level, or that are in the law, the professors at universities, or in state or federal positions before, or even private practice. There are a lot of well-known legal minds that are Indian American, and what we're really hoping is that whenever there's consideration of a justice, of nominating a justice and approving them in the Senate, that Indian American justices are looked at as well, at least being considered as part of the group. So that is something that I wanted to convey over to you, and I don't know if Sanjay has some more comments on that, but we just wanted to give that message to you to pass on.
Sure,
to the
thank you.
As well.
We'll certainly do that.
Manish, Chris asked about some suggestions, and I don't know, you are, Chris, obviously maxing technology out, but I'll throw you one suggestion, and you probably are doing it, so I hope you don't think I'm. Indian Americans and a lot of the ethnic communities use, and I can tell you because of what has happened is because we travel globally quite a bit, is we use WhatsApp groups, and I don't know if you're using WhatsApp groups.
We use for internal communication here, yeah.
Yeah, so just, are you using WhatsApp groups also quite a bit, Chris?
We do. We use it for internal communication at the campaign.
Well, to beam it out also, because I know it has just become huge in terms of ethnic communities, because when you're traveling outside, it just whether you're on Android or on your iMessage, etc., if you're on WhatsApp, it becomes much easier. But just something for you to think about. And I think Manish talked a lot about the justice, and I think he covered the message that we need to do. And if somebody wants to volunteer for your campaign, Chris, it's basically go to tedcruz.org. Is that the best way to reach out?
It is.
Because a lot of people want to volunteer.
It absolutely is, and I think it depends on the state. There's a lot of states where we may have an office right there with you. If we don't have an office there, and you go to tedcruz.org and sign up, you'll be contacted immediately. But really the easiest way to get involved right now is you download the app, and you can start doing things while you're sitting at your desk. I mean, literally doing things, just little things like retweeting the senator, or sharing the post on Facebook, or allowing us to match your contacts and finding some of your friends that may live in South Carolina that you could reach out to. You will find that app very useful and effective, I think, from a standpoint of getting involved in the campaign without ever having to talk to another person if you didn't want to. Which is, for those, a lot of people who use technology who would prefer to do things without having to do anything other than talk to friends. And I think that's the process we've been able to create through the app, and it's one that in terms of evaluations, there's really nothing else like it that exists, and hopefully it would allow anybody to get involved, no matter whether they're in South Carolina where there's election on Saturday, Nevada where there's one on Tuesday, and we have offices in both those states, all over the state, or whether they live in Alaska or another state without any campaign offices near them. So it really allows anyone to get involved and help out immediately.
Great.
Thanks, Chris. I think we have one final question from Dolly, and then we'll have Sanjay give some concluding remarks, and then we're hoping that we get you for just 30 seconds after the call ends, just to thank you, and after we're off air, if that's
okay.
all right.
Sure.
So, Dolly, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. Chris, thank you. I loved your response to how you are digitally managing the campaign. Of course, because I understand that better, of course. So having said that, now that you mentioned in between that you've been working for the campaign, and of course, and now that you know Mr. Cruz closely, my question to you is, this is from Rita Vaswani. She's a community leader in Nevada. She wants to know, how would you say that Cruz presidency would be different than any other presidency?
I don't know that I could say that it's going to be different than any other presidency. I know from a president, he really emulates Ronald Reagan and thinks a lot of him. I think, to go back to some of the questions we talked about, if you thought Antonin Scalia was a great Supreme Court justice, then you'd probably like the type of justices that Senator Cruz would appoint, or President Cruz would appoint. If you look at, if you want someone who's going to rebuild the military and support our allies, then you're probably going to like someone like Senator Cruz. I think if there's one thing that I'm most proud of on this campaign, it's what we did in Iowa. Not from a campaign standpoint, but what Ted Cruz did. And there's an interesting article that was written in Politico by Wolf Blitzer, I believe, in which he interviewed Steve King. Steve King's a congressman from Iowa who ended up endorsing Ted Cruz. And they talk about a 5-hour dinner that Steve King and Ted Cruz had, in which King had no other agenda than to try and get Ted Cruz to support ethanol subsidies. And Ted Cruz said, no, I'm not going to do it. And for 5 hours, King told him that he could not win Iowa if he took on the ethanol industry. They had to change his position on ethanol subsidies. Bear in mind that no one had ever taken on the ethanol industry before, and certainly no winner had taken it on. There may have been some minor candidate somewhere that went and took them on. And Ted Cruz would not capitulate. He went up against what I would call the ethanol cartel. Senator Cruz talks a lot about the Washington cartel, the lobbyists and the special interests that are not supportive of his candidacy. And in doing so, he made it very clear that he did not support subsidies for anyone. He believed in a level playing field. And I think he did a very effective job during that campaign of explaining to ethanol farmers. In fact, there's one clip that ended up going viral in which he is confronted by a very angry corn farmer talking about how the subsidies would kill him. And Senator Cruz explained why it would not kill him. And then the farmer said, well, what about oil and gas subsidies? I hear you support those, which was a story that was told, an ad that was run by the ethanol industry, which was not true. And Senator Cruz explained that, no, he supported no subsidies whatsoever. He supported a level playing field. And what ended up happening was the farmer was interviewed on the way out, and they said, well, what do you think? He said, well, I changed my mind. I'm going to vote for him now. And he did win. And I think that's the kind of presidency you're going to get with Ted Cruz, one that does not capitulate to special interests, one that does not give in to the Washington cartel, one that gives every idea and every community and a hearing based on the merits of their ideas and the merits of their proposals. And from an overall standpoint of how this presidency would be different, I think certainly than anything we've seen in recent past, it is one that is going to be open, far more open, and far more accepting of just the ideas and of the people. It's remarkable to me how many people I've seen get elected, and through messages like hope and change, and yet when they become president or when they get elected to a specific office, that they just become a part of the Washington establishment. And there really is just one party when it comes to most of Washington, and it is one that represents what Senator Cruz famously has labeled the cartel. And it's unfortunate because what it does is it keeps small businessmen, it keeps people who we have to fight, and I own a small business, we fight uphill every single day. And I think the challenges we're facing right now with Obamacare, I'm sure many of your members are dealing with this. Do you hire that 50th person and have to make those decisions about whether or not your profits just take a huge hit or your net does, or do you just keep not, or do you spun off to different business? You know, there's just the silly decisions we're having to make right now because of government regulation. You would see that just absolutely stripped away in terms of the differences that, in terms of the changes that Senator Cruz would make. And I think he is the only candidate in this field that has exhibited an ongoing consistency to be trusted in those matters. And he didn't get elected and go change his mind on a series of issues. He has stayed true to his values and to his beliefs and the promises he made the people of Texas. And that's what you would see in a Ted Cruz presidency.
Oh, great, thanks, Chris. That's really helpful, and we very much appreciate your time today and addressing so many different issues that we raised. And I wanted to go to Sanjay, who's the chairman of USINPAC, for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Manish, and thanks, Chris, for a wonderful, informative session. We do these sessions so that the Indian American community around the country gets an opportunity to really understand the candidate so they can support them from a political standpoint, from a campaign standpoint. If they want to volunteer for them, they want to support them. Our message is not just to people who are listening. It goes on our website, it goes on our YouTube channel, and then we promote it on social media. So this has been very, very helpful, and we thank you for making the time, especially given what all you have coming up in South Carolina and Nevada, and I hope this was very helpful. So thanks to everybody here, and thank you, Chris.
Thank you.